evening, and thank you for joining in. I'm Faye. This is part of our daily lives that we bring you when we have important things to discuss. I want to give you first a quick recap of various things that have happened in our high courts today. The Madras High Court has strongly criticized the Election Commission, calling it solely responsible, singularly responsible for spreading COVID-19, and saying murder charges should be imposed against it for its irresponsible behavior. It basically said that you are the only institution responsible for the situation we are in today. You have been singularly lacking in any kind of exercise of authority. It went as far, the bench went as far as to ask the Election Commission if it was living on another planet when the poll rallies were being held, and also issued a warning to the Election Commission that in no way should the 2nd of May results and counting of votes be a catalyst for a further surge. Meanwhile, the Delhi government and the central government continue to battle it out in Delhi High Court. Delhi's reported a worrying surge of at least 22,000 cases in the last 24 hours. 350 people are dead in Delhi in 24 hours alone. And of course, the biggest problem that's being reported is the shortage of medical oxygen. The Delhi High Court today pulled up the central government when Solicitor General Dushyant said that the deaths caused in Delhi by shortage of oxygen is not because of the central government, because it's not the central government's job to supply oxygen. It's the state government's job. The bench clarified that it's both of your jobs to do it. The oxygen supplier INOX said that it is getting right now contradictory orders from Delhi and the central government, and similar other arguments continued. Remember, Tushar Mehta also asked the Delhi government to stop being a crying baby about the fact that it's not getting oxygen. Joining me this evening to discuss all of the things that are going on in our court and in our country is Mr. Dushyant, who's come back after that last explosive interview he gave me last week, which got a fair amount of reactions. Mr. Dave, thank you for coming back, and good evening to you. I must ask you though, before we get to what's happening in our courts right now, after our last conversation, you came under a fair amount of criticism, specifically by the Supreme Court itself, who said that you hadn't read the order correctly and you shouldn't be attributing, reasons in that way to what the Supreme Court says. What is your response to that criticism?
Well, I can't respond to the Supreme Court because that's an institution that I respect and admire and love. But I did write an article in Bar and Bench clarifying. I frankly didn't want to enter into a dialogue with the honorable judges during the course of that hearing when they made that statement. Frankly, on every count, with greatest respects, the judges were wrong. Their order speaks for itself, their order on the first day. Their proceedings in the court speak for themselves, where during the proceedings more than once, Chief Justice Bobde, then Chief Justice Bobde, spoke about withdrawing the cases from the High Court. The order itself suggested, and that's why the order issued notices to the parties who had filed the petitions in High Court and to all state governments as to why on these 4 points Supreme Court should not decide. And those were the 4 points like availability of oxygen, hospital beds, etc., which High Courts were considering. So from any count, frankly, there is no doubt in my mind that the Supreme Court's attempt was to take away the matters, from the High Courts, which High Courts were hearing, and rightly so. And Supreme Court wanted perhaps to hear them. And I frankly feel that Supreme Court was too late, in a day to have really thought of these matters, because it had been sleeping over it for weeks, if not months. And therefore, when the High Courts had started taking strong action, had started passing strong observations against the central government. See, my own feeling is that perhaps the central government also was happy if the Supreme Court, withdrew these cases to itself, because then High Courts would not make stinging observations, as you have been seeing High Courts have been doing for past some time. The Supreme Court is very, very, I would say, charitable to the central government, to Modi government, and particularly to Mr. Tushar Mehta, the learned Solicitor General. So I think all in all, I would leave it at that. I think it's for people to judge as to what exactly, the Supreme Court had intended to do when it passed that, fateful order on the first day. And I wouldn't like to, defend myself in these circumstances.
Well, there were other criticisms, Mr. Dave, that you got outside of court, mostly from civil society, who called you anti-national, said you were spreading negativity, and also accused you of being anti-government, or let's say siding with the opposition. So I want to ask you point blank to clarify to the audience. Are you left-wing, right-wing? Are you anti-BJP? Are you against the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi? What are your political preferences?
Well, I am pro-constitution. I am not anti-anybody. Let me put it that way. I have no political ideology. I am anti-establishment person. And I have no political ambitions. I do not ascribe to any political party. I have criticized Congress when it was in power. In fact, I went on television more than once to say that then Prime Minister Mr. Manmohan Singh should be prosecuted both in 2G and Colgate cases, along with former Attorney General of India, late Mr. Ghulam Mahanwati, who was a very personal friend of mine. I also went on television to say that Mr. Robert Vadra should be investigated, and if found guilty, he should be prosecuted. This was when the Congress was in power. And I was the one who really sent, virtually I appeared in large number of Sikh riot cases. I was the one who successfully opposed bail being granted to Sajan Kumar. I mean, it was one of the most, I would say, satisfying hearing that I had in my life, where I virtually stopped Supreme Court from giving a clean chit to Sajan Kumar in these serious cases. So I have nothing to do with any political party. I mean, political party have their roles to play. I respect them for it. I have my own role to play as a lawyer, as a constitutional lover, and as somebody who really feels that rule of law must be observed as much as possible. So far as Mr. Modi is concerned, I have personally known Mr. Modi in the past. I have nothing personal against him. But I certainly do not agree with any one of his policies. Starting from the Gujarat prognosis till today, I am really against Mr. Modi's prognosis, and I have never hidden my views about it. I have been openly writing articles against his policies and his actions or inactions. And I have been, I have given more than 400 television interviews where I have questioned his policies, actions, and inactions. It's nothing personal. It's because I genuinely feel that in a democracy, you need somebody who really should be able to show a mirror to those in power. And that's what matters ultimately. So it's not, and those who say that we are anti-national or,
Yes.
is really.
Mr. Dave, I want to ask you that question. You did say in a democracy, you need someone who will show a mirror to establishment, all establishment. Right now, I had a couple of guests on my show a couple of days ago who said that part of this problem that we are experiencing in India is the responsibility of the media that didn't ask questions at the right time. At this point, where there is a chunk of the media, we have to be honest, many journalists who are doing great work, who are being called out for spreading negativity, who are being called out for reporting from graveyards and from crematoriums, saying you are giving us a bad name and spreading negativity. You were called out for spreading negativity. What is your response to that?
Well, let me tell you one thing. I mean, if there is any negativity which is coming, it's from the government. And that's because its government is not guilty of just misinformation. Prime Minister himself accused, in his Man Ki Baat, that do not, go by misinformation or disinformation. I respectfully tell the Prime Minister and his government and most of the state governments controlled by the Bharatiya Janata Party, including Gujarat, that they are guilty of false information. People are dying, people are suffering beyond imagination, beyond repair. Please, Faye, you must remember, I have lost my own brother in COVID. My own son, my daughter-in-law, and my 3-year-old grandson went through COVID. We could fight it out because we have the resources with the grace of God. Every house today, household in the country today is facing a challenge on account of COVID. Either it is a challenge physically because of sickness, because of death in the family or in the, amongst relations or friends, or it's because of the economic challenges that the families are facing. There is no peace in the country left at all. Everybody is on edge. The whole country is on boil on account of this situation, which in my view was clearly avoidable, as countries successfully have shown, like New Zealand, like Australia, like South Korea. Many countries have shown that by closing the borders, you could have easily controlled COVID, well. Unfortunately, we failed. Now, if you call this negativity to discuss, so who is guilty? The governments are hiding figures. In Gujarat, every television channel is telling you today that the number of people who are being cremated are far more than what the government of Gujarat is admitting. I mean, the difference is several times. It's happening everywhere in the country. So I feel that truth ultimately is the best disinfectant. And unless and until we tell people truthfully what is happening in the country, you see, nobody is now, let us understand one thing. There is no doubt about the fact that the government has failed and failed miserably. Now, there is no point going behind it again and again. But today, how do you salvage that situation? Not by false information, not by telling people that you are guilty of disinformation or negativity. In fact, what is this negativity? Those who speak about negativity are actually spreading negativity in the country. People like us, everybody who wants to speak, the media including, about the truth today, the real position, are actually doing a great job. That's the positivity. That's the positivity which they are doing. And I will tell you one statement of none other than the founder of RSS, one of the most respected Indians. I don't agree with his views, but this is what Dr. Ambedkar said long back: accept only that which stands to reason. Accept only that which stands to reason. Never accept anything merely because it is preceded by some great leader. It is prescribed by some great leader. Test is truth on the touchstone of intellectual discrimination. Now, this is where we have to decipher between truth and falsehood. Now, if we do it, we are not doing it negatively. I love this country as much as anybody else does. Anybody, all these people who say that we are anti-India, I love India as much as you do, sir or madam. Yes, you don't have a right to say that you are the only people who love India. In our own way, we do it. I have been a lawyer for 42 years. I have helped hundreds of litigants free of charge. I have paid my taxes honestly for 42 years of my career. I have been rewarded by income tax department all through my life. And I have stood up for every cause that one can think of. What more can I do as a good Indian? That's all I can do. So I don't think anybody should think that I have nothing about politics. I do not have any grievance against BJP. Yes, okay. I do not agree to their policies. And I say so very, very openly.
Mr. Dave, I have a couple of legal questions for you. On one hand, over the weekend, we heard the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh, Mr. Adityanath, put out a statement saying that there is no shortage of oxygen. And if any private hospital is spreading rumors about the shortage of oxygen, the state will proceed against that private hospital. That's one. On the other hand, we had the government of India instruct social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook to take down messaging that they then justified was because they felt it would hamper law and order by enraging people with those visuals. Legally, under which law is the government allowed to do such a thing? One, is the Uttar Pradesh government allowed to move against private hospitals for claiming that they've run out of oxygen?
Well, these governments, unfortunately, I must say with utmost respect, and this is where Prime Minister has to really step in to stop this kind of a nonsense. And I really must regret that Prime Minister has never stopped all these people from taking law into their hands, whether it was killing of innocent people in the name of cow slaughter, or whether it was love jihad, or it is now. Prime Minister is a Prime Minister of India. He represents everybody. He has to rise above anything and everything, including this small, kind of politics, petty politics that people indulge in for grabbing power. Prime Minister is a very sincere person. He's a very hardworking man. I have respect for that. But he must speak out against these people. He must tell them. In fact, time has come for Prime Minister to, he said yesterday in his Man Ki Baat that India is facing the greatest challenge on COVID-19. And it's very critical that we are really, going through this phase. He admitted it. Now, and everybody knows that people are dying. Now, if anybody were to move against the hospital, I mean, all that, chief ministers like Mr. Yogi Adityanath, I think should not really put any kind of a pressure on anybody. It's not in good taste. It's not really healthy for a democracy. And this is very important. I'll tell you, this is a second statement of Dr. Hedgewar on democracy. Democracy does not reside in speeches, but in actual practices of its votaries. And this is what is important. These people who really don't understand what democracy is about, they have all been elected on the platform of democracy. They must therefore allow people to speak. What's wrong about? Why are they afraid that people should speak against them? If they are right, people will judge them rightly. If people are wrong, they will be judged accordingly. So I don't think any political leader, much less of the stature of a prime minister or chief minister of Uttar Pradesh, should have any reservation about people speaking about what is happening on the road. Listen, you must understand, if somebody's relative is dying, if somebody's mother is dying, somebody's father is dying, brother is dying, sister is dying, or a friend is dying, you are bound to feel their angst. And they are entitled to express that angst. There is no doubt about the fact that, as I said in your show earlier, that in the absence of a credible national plan to fight COVID, this was inevitable situation. Today, I went through the plan, National Disaster Management Plan of 2019 in extenso. I spent almost 2 hours. It's 384 pages. And it has simply just about 5 pages on biological, disaster, which may include COVID, let us assume. Now, what kind of plan it is? That plan has nothing except there is a table in which central government and state government's roles are defined in a table, in a tabular form. That plan does not deal with a situation like this. Even today, I must say the government of India has been issuing missives after missives to the state government that you do this, you do that.
Yes.
Yeah,
So,
frankly,
I forgive me for interrupting you, but on that very point, like I called out, the Delhi government and the central government are currently arguing in Delhi High Court whose responsibility is it to bring in the oxygen, whose responsibility is it to distribute it. Solicitor General Dushyant has argued 2 things. One, Delhi government shouldn't be writing to Sajjan Jindal directly and asking for oxygen. That has to come from the central government. But at the same time, the responsibility to put the oxygen in the hospital is not the central government, but the Delhi government. At what point will these things be cleared up and roles be made accurately clear as to whose responsibility what is? How do we function without knowing that?
See, there is no doubt that this is a disaster. And Section 11 of the Disaster Management Act of 2005, on which Prime Minister Modi's government has made the plan in 2019, expressly says that there shall be drawn a plan for disaster management for the whole country to be called National Plan. And amongst the measures, it should include measures to be taken for preparedness and capacity building to effectively respond to any threatening disaster situations or disaster. So please see this, capacity building to effectively respond to any threatening disaster situation, which includes oxygen. The responsibility was on the central government to prepare that plan. Central government has miserably failed. Shockingly, even after 2020, central government failed to really look at this act and prepare the plan as would these COVID task force under the Niti Aayog is functioning virtually on ad hoc basis. It has really no concrete plan. Unless and until you have a concrete plan, how do you visualize? How do you coordinate? How do you provide measures? And how do you effectively implement them? It is impossible for a nation like India with 140 crore population to do that. We have very serious challenges. And this is where, I feel that we really are missing the point. I would really be happy if the Prime Minister interjects and tells his law officer that please do not argue like this. This is not a slanging match between you and Delhi government. Let us agree that yes, providing this is a joint responsibility of central and state governments, and it should be done. Because, fact of the matter is, what is happening today, that a lot of BJP states are garnering the oxygen much more. Like Mr. Amit Shah went to Gujarat and said that we are going to give 11 oxygen plants, new plants to Gujarat, just 2 days back. Now, we have seen in Gujarat, for example, and in Maharashtra, that BJP top leaders garnered remdesivir, medicines from somewhere and wanted to distribute them to the BJP people. Now, that's unacceptable behavior. And Prime Minister, I have no doubt, will not approve of it. So, but what is important is that Prime Minister must step in and stop this kind of nonsense going on. Let's fight this as a coordinated one nation, as a cohesive nation. Forget politics. And in fact, I would call upon the opposition also to stop now this slanging match. Because let me ask you one thing. This Mr. Rahul Gandhi, who has been saying all kinds of things for a long time, or any other opposition leader, did they even once demand during 2020 in Parliament, on the floor of Parliament, that Mr. Government, Mr. Prime Minister, where is your national plan to fight COVID? Not one of them. Not one of them has read this act. Not one of them has read what the plan of 2019 is and how inadequate and insufficient it is. So I don't think our opposition is also doing any credit-worthy, job. They are equally, the entire political class has failed. And that is where we have to realize as a people that we must put moral pressure on the political class so that they now stop this bickering and devise some mechanism. Because, thousands of lives are being lost for what? For negligence of the governments, for the political class. Why should we suffer? Just think about somebody's source of livelihood is gone because his only working son is gone. Somebody's father is dead, somebody's mother is dead. How are you going to compensate all these? It is impossible to really. It's all right for prime ministers to say that, oh, there is COVID and it's a great crisis and our lives are being lost. Is that the only way prime minister should say in his Man Ki Baat? Did he assure the country as to what thos kadam that I am going to take, my government is going to take, and that I will call opposition leaders and tell them that you give suggestions, let us implement them together? No.
So, Mr. Govt, the other point, yes, the other point where politics did come up was the question of vaccinations, and this I want to be able to ask you, because right now there is a plan that will get kicked in on the 1st of March. For the 1st of May, I beg your pardon. Now, based on this plan, the central government has a different pricing of vaccines. The state government has a different pricing of vaccine, and the private sector will have a different pricing. Now, there's always been a difference between public and private, but is there a reason constitutionally, for India to be charging for vaccines in this fashion, for different pricing for state and center? And we've seen the vaccine become again an issue of politics. Congress states are saying that they're not getting enough vaccine. The BJP states are saying we'll offer it to you for free. So again, are we letting politics come in the way? And constitutionally, is there an argument against high pricing of vaccine?
See, sadly, vaccination has become an extremely political issue. And I must say that the Bharatiya Janata Party and Prime Minister himself is responsible for it. Because on every COVID certificate, there is Prime Minister's photograph. Now, Prime Minister is neither the inventor of this vaccine, nor the Prime Minister is the one who is paying for it. It is the country which is paying for it. It is we, the taxpayers, who are paying for it. If at all anybody's photo should have come, it could have been the President of India. Every executive action is in the name of the President of India, never in the name of Prime Minister. So I think what the Prime Minister has done is a great disservice to himself. And I really wish somebody had pointed. The difficulty with Prime Minister Mr. Modi is that he is such a strong personality that nobody around him, neither in party, nor in cabinet, nor in governance, is willing to even remind him as to what is right and wrong. And this is where I feel that Prime Minister does not get the right advice. He means well, I have no doubt about it. He is sincere. He has bundle of energy. He wants to do something. But somebody must be able to tell him that, Mr. Prime Minister, this is not the way to go about. There is no country in the world where the photograph of a Prime Minister is given on vaccination. I mean, that certificate is my right. Why should it be stamped by, Prime Minister's photograph? So I feel that this is where, so that's the beginning, unfortunately, of politics. The opposition, also must also realize that, look, vaccines are in limit. It is not that we have abundant source of vaccine available in this country, although the largest producer may be in Pune in India. We have 140 crore people. It is virtually impossible to vaccinate all people for almost a year or two, and especially complete 2 doses. Coupled with that, this company has contracts with foreign buyers, which were much before Government of India placed the contract. All the foreign governments, and sadly, this is when Mr. Modi's government failed. All the foreign governments had entered into contracts for supply of vaccines at the research stage. And they therefore paid these companies in advance to buy these vaccines. We didn't do that. In fact, Mr. Poonawalla made a grievance that his money which is outstanding is not being paid, or that he deserves more money to, increase the capacity. Government agreed last week only to release some funds to him. Now, that kind of a situation was clearly avoidable. If all this could have been done with a national plan, unfortunately, nobody really thought. And this is where I must tell you, I must remind the country about Prime Minister's own statements on 24th of March 2020, on the eve of his lockdown, 5-hour lockdown, with just 560 corona cases at that point of time. Now, just see what the Prime Minister said on that day. This is very important. He said, but saving the life of every Indian is my first priority, as it is for the government of India as well as state government. Then he said, I will allocate 15,000 crore. This will be used to increase isolation wards, ICU beds, and medical and paramedical manpower. This is said. Then he said, every statement is extraordinary. He said, experts are saying that social distancing is the only option to battle coronavirus. How did he forget it in West Bengal? How did he forget that? This is the Prime Minister of India warning the whole country. The experts are saying that social distancing is the only option to battle coronavirus. Then he says, some people are under the misconception that social distancing is only for people suffering from COVID-19. Then he adds, very important, it is for every citizen, every family, and every member of family. It is even for Prime Minister, he said. This is his statement on 24th of March 2020. He then says something extraordinary. And this is where he mocked foreign governments. And now see how it is like boomeranging on us. Once the virus spreads, it is difficult to stop it. This is why China, France, USA, Spain, Italy, Iran are suffered when virus spread in those countries. Remember, Italy and USA have some of the best considered healthcare services in the world, and they couldn't mitigate the impact of coronavirus. He was virtually mocking these foreign countries who have today promised help to us. Today only these countries have promised help to us to fight COVID. Then he ends, and this is very important. It spreads like wildfire. Another statistics put by the WHO is that it took 67 days to reach 1 lakh people. The next 1 lakh were affected 11 days. It took 4 days to take the number to 3 lakh. We are facing 3 lakh every day for last 6 days. And what is happening? Nothing. There is no concrete plan. There are ad hoc decisions being thrown out by government of India to state government. Everybody is confused. Nobody really knows. Vaccines, it is Prime Minister has promised everybody above 18 will get vaccine. Where is the production? And will you have a server which is capable of registering 100 crore people or 110 crore people now? Do you have a server? It will crash for asking, because now the government says only if you are registered, you will be entitled to COVID vaccination. How are you going to register? How are illiterate people going to register? How are villagers going to register? So these are unique problems where Prime Minister needed guidance from the best. This country's people are the best. Prime Minister needs not these government officers, not these Niti Aayog, not his big cabinet. Prime Minister needs to go now outside. In fact, he has done it. He has realized that private sector can contribute. Recently on Public Services Examination Board, he has appointed Mrs. What is her name? The Chennai entrepreneur, very respected, as the chairperson. So, Prime Minister knows that there are limitations, and they have appointed large number of officers in government as joint secretaries from the private sector. I feel that there are, it's very interesting. In 2014, after the election results came, a beautiful article appeared in one of the newspapers in California. And this journalist who had traveled to India during election says very beautifully, he says India can be described in 2 words. He said, one, jugaad kar lo, और दूसरा चलता है. So I respectfully say that we can forget chalta hai now. But jugaad kar lo is something which we need today to fight COVID. And for that, you need the best in the business to do it. They are the people who every day know how to do jugaad. Our bureaucrats are incapable of really conceiving beyond their tables. I mean, it's not that I have any disrespect for bureaucrats. No, I have some of the best friends in bureaucracy. I admire them for their hard work, and they have really been working sincerely, but they have limitations. What you need are scientists. South Korea, when COVID hit, President said, I'm not going to run this country. I will appoint a committee of scientists who will run this country. Now, that's the kind of a situation we need today. Scientists with industrialists. You are running for oxygen from one industrialist to the other.
Mr. Davi, in the meantime, all of these matters have wound up in front of our courts. The courts find themselves actually making decisions on lockdowns, making decisions on perhaps vaccine pricing, making decisions on whether or not the Election Commission has done its job. Is it the job of our courts to step in all of these matters? And what do you expect from the courts now going forward, from the judiciary?
Well, I'm sure courts are not happy doing what they are doing. I can assure you of that. I know my legal system quite well. But do they have any option? Can judges sit there and see that thousands of people are being allowed to die? I'll give you one statistics, for example. This is very shocking. I just told my colleague to research that and tell me. And this statistic shows, just give me a minute, okay? I am very poor about technology, so I can't take it out very quickly. Yeah. So this shows that on 5th of February, total number of active cases in West Bengal were 5,097. That was the first day when BJP rally took place. On 22nd April, the active cases shot up to 63,496. Now, Bengal's pace of increase in COVID cases is 1,040%, highest in the country. Positivity rate is the highest in the country. And the Prime Minister addressed a first rally on 7th March, and from 7th March to 22nd March, Prime Minister addressed as many as 13 or 14 rallies. Now, just imagine that Prime Minister who spoke to the country and said social distancing is the only answer to fight COVID, goes to these rallies. And look at Mr. Shah has again and again said there is no correlation between COVID and election rallies. With greatest respect to Mr. Shah, people are going to die now in West Bengal and Tamil Nadu. They have already started. Every life must matter to the state. They are the ultimate custodian of people's lives, both Prime Minister and Home Minister and every minister, the government, the state government, the central government. They are the custodian under the constitution of our lives. They can't. So courts are stepping in because under our constitution, although there is separation of power, but if one wing fails, and the executive has clearly failed miserably, the judiciary, according to me, has a bounden duty, an obligation to the constitution to intervene. If they didn't, in fact, they didn't till the other day. And I'm very critical that they didn't. During the COVID year, the Supreme Court functioned disastrously when it came to COVID-related issues. I mean, when migrants were being sprayed with insecticides, Supreme Court didn't even give them compensation. What kind of a court is this? Are we going to treat our human beings as insects? Oh, come on now, give me a break. They have a duty. Supreme Court says we are the custodian of the fundamental rights of the citizen and gives hajar judgments as to how they are really going to be the repository, final repository of the constitution and constitutional morality. When it comes to the crunch, the Supreme Court doesn't act. So if the high courts are intervening, I think it's an extraordinarily welcome, although delayed, but it is a welcome move. And I really say with greatest responsibility that high courts are doing their job. We must allow them to continue to do their job. Nobody should criticize the courts. In fact, government should really aid the courts to say that, yes, please do whatever you want to do.
Mr. Davi, since the last time we spoke, we now have a new Chief Justice of India. Justice Ramanan has taken over. What are your expectations or your hopes from the Supreme Court under Justice Ramna?
I don't want to say about that. I can only say one thing, that you must read my article which appeared in Indian Express yesterday on his elevation.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Yeah, and that really sums up what my expectations are. Last four Chief Justices, Justice Kher, Justice Mishra, Justice Gogoi, and Justice Bobde, with greatest respects to them, they have failed miserably. And believe you me, from each one of them, we had expected a lot. Each one of them was known to be very strong and upright judge. Something just goes wrong when they become Chief Justices. And they have disappointed likes of us beyond imagination. So I really feel that I really, ball is now in Chief Justice Ramna's court. He knows that there is challenge. There are many challenges. Administration of justice is virtually become defunct, not just because of COVID, but because of sheer pendency of cases. 4.5 crore cases are pending. People are not getting justice. What justice delayed is justice denied. That has been said for a long time. The judges, chief justices are just not interested in galvanizing the administration of justice. They have in their power. They can do it, but nobody is interested. Once they become chief justice, they just enjoy that very beautiful cushy position with a pilot car in front and pilot car behind them, and forget their role really is administration of justice. Their role is not to sit on the bench of the Supreme Court and decide cases in favor of government. That's not their role. Their role is, because he's the head of the entire judiciary of the country. And rule of law is so sacrosanct for, democracy, that unless and until you have, fiercely independent, extraordinarily intelligent and strong judiciary, rule of law is bound to fail. And it's failing. Common man is facing it. In fact, Chief Justice Ramna has himself said that justice is eluding people, and particularly those who are vulnerable sections of society, the Dalits, the Muslims, and others. He said that just a few weeks ago. So I think I really hope and pray that Justice Ramna would really do something, because he has some really good colleagues on the bench.
Mr. Dave, along with pendency, the other problem in the judiciary is vacancies and the slowing of judicial appointments. Do you expect or do you hope that gets sorted out as well?
Look, let us understand one thing. The executive does not like judiciary, period. And executive therefore will do everything possible to stall the strength of judiciary being increased, the infrastructure being provided, and the manpower being increased. Why would any politician or bureaucrat like a judge who is going to question him or her work? That's very human. And that's where, that's where really the sagacity and wisdom and vision of a chief justice comes into play. That he really must assert in such a way that he can strengthen the judiciary so strongly that the executive is kept in check. Nobody says that judges should take over the work of the executive. No, I am surely not for it. But the executive has been failing so badly in this country. Parliament has been failing so badly. I mean, look at these farm laws. It's a classic example that Parliament could never have passed those laws that's within the realm of the state subject. Yet Parliament did it. But the Supreme Court is not willing to strike them down. If I were a Supreme Court Chief Justice, I would have constituted a bench and heard the matter and decided in no time. Love jihad laws. The same Chief Justice Bobde wanted to bring these matters to Supreme Court, declined when people went to Supreme Court and said every state is bringing this law. It's a draconian law. Large number of people are put in jail because of love. Kindly hear it. He said, no, go to High Court. Now, this is the same Chief Justice Bobde. So what do you do about this kind of a, functioning of the court? They are not answerable to anybody except to God. So I don't know what's the solution. You won't believe I am having for years on sleepless nights thinking about what's going to happen to the country. My life is virtually gone. I'm 66. I'm worried about my grandchildren. I'm worried about the next generation of Indians. What is the kind of a nation we are going to give them? Is this the kind of a nation which we are going to give them, where rich and the powerful control everything? No, we need a country where justice really is available to everybody, and justice quickly and cheaply.
Mr. Dave, we do still have, and you started this conversation saying that you love the Constitution. We do still have a very beautiful Constitution, which Dr. Ambedkar and his team wrote for us. It remains as relevant today as it was when it was first written. In order to truly live and grow into the country that the Constitution envisioned for us to be, what needs to be done now?
Two things. This is where I'm glad you asked that question. And I think, on the 26th of November 1949, last day of the Constituent Assembly debate, one of India's greatest sons, Dr. Rajendra Prasad, who was the president of the assembly and our first president, he said, and this is very important, we have prepared a democratic constitution, but successful working of democratic institutions requires in those who have to work them willingness to respect the viewpoints of others, capacity for compromise and accommodation. Many things which we cannot be written in a constitution are done by conventions. Let me hope that we shall show those capacities and develop those conventions. The way in which we have been able to draw up this constitution without taking recourse to voting and to divisions in lobbies strengthens that hope. Look at the way Constituent Assembly function. 200 plus people, but no division of votes, no voting, unanimously approved. And for 2 years, they debated the Constitution, every threadbare. But let me also now tell you the warning that Dr. Ambedkar gave on the last. This is his parting warning on the same day, 25th of November. He says, times are fast changing. People, including our own, are being moved by new ideologies. They are getting tired of government by the people. Look at the words. They are getting tired of government by the people. They are prepared to have government for the people and are indifferent whether it is government of the people and by the people. If we wish to preserve the Constitution, and this is the answer to you, if we wish to preserve the Constitution in which we have sought to enshrine the principle of government of the people, for the people and by the people, let us resolve not to be tardy in the recognition of the evils that lie across our path and which induce people to prefer government for the people to government by the people, nor to be weak in our initiatives to remove them. That is the only way to serve the country. I know of no better. Look at this man's foresight, his vision. Look at his prophecy. I mean, these are, and every day, every year when Dr. Ambedkar's Jayanti comes, Prime Minister down to every corporator also swears by Dr. Ambedkar. But I can assure you, not one of them has read or understood what Ambedkar stood for. And that's the, unless and until we are able to imbibe in every citizen constitutional morality, respect for the Constitution, and desire to defend the Constitution till the last blood in their body, we will not be able to have a country that was envisaged by our constitutional framers. That is something very, very important. There is one more thing I want to tell you, and this is, it's my personal message to those who are, criticizing likes of us today for speaking out. And this is important because I am as much a patriot as anybody else is. I don't have to go to the border to show my patriotism. Okay, I can do it sitting here because difference between patriotism and nationalism is simple. A patriot loves his country and is proud of it for which it does. And is proud of it for which it does. Whereas a nationalist loves his country and is proud of his country no matter what it does. And this is the difference between a patriot and a nationalist. Zionism was nationalism, but it brought Israel into existence. India's freedom struggle was nationalism, and it gave India independent struggle. But nationalism also led to Nazism and birth of Hitler and killing of 6 to 7 million innocent citizens. Patriotism is, yes. Nationalism, this complete misunderstanding about what love for India is. You can't just love your government for whatever it does. No, you can't. You have to ask the government the questions every day if you love your country. That, Mr. Government, this is something which you are doing wrong. Please kindly correct yourself. People are suffering. People are dying. People are running helter and skelter from one hospital to the other. They don't find beds. They don't find oxygen. They don't find ventilator. What kind of a country we are giving? What kind of a governance we are giving? Please correct yourself immediately. That's not anti-national. That's because you love your country. Your courage to speak truth comes because you love your country. It doesn't come from cowardice. You're not attacking your government. You're not attacking your country. So I feel that, these people who really try and, raise this narrative, really, let me tell you something. RSS, I don't agree with it. But in Gujarat, when the floods came, one of my friends was Mr. Arun Oja, then, government pleader in the High Court. And he was a very active RSS man, very respected RSS person. He asked me for help for RSS organizations. And I readily gave a substantial sum. This is some 15 years ago, 20 years ago. I don't differentiate between institutions. If I can give money to Professor Bandukwala in Baroda to help Muslims, I can also help RSS to help those who were flood victims in Surat. That's my duty to the country. There is no calamity in which I have neither worked personally, whether it was Kutch earthquake, whether it was tsunami in Tamil Nadu, where I went personally and spent weeks. There is no crisis in the country, whether Chennai floods, Assam flood, or any situation, or Kargil war, where I would not generously, or Uttarakhand flood, where I would not generously donate to government. I gave a generous amount to PM Care Fund when this COVID came. Why? I gave it to CM Care Fund also in Delhi. Why would I do that? If I disagreed with Prime Minister Modi or I was against his government, I would not have given. But it's because I love my country as much as. So when I do all that, Mr. Dave is nice. When Mr. Dave attacks Manmohan Singh's, Mr. Dave is nice. But when Mr. Dave questions Mr. Modi's government, Mr. Dave is anti-national. Well, if that's the branding you want to give, there's nothing I can do. People will have to judge for themselves as to who I am and where I stand.
All right, Mr. Dave, thank you so much for speaking with me this evening on all of these matters. Dushyant Dave, the senior advocate of the Supreme Court.